Well, good morning, everyone. My name is Liz Lageson, and I am the training director for the UCLA Tarjan Center, which is our University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities. I'd like to begin by welcoming you all to the Tarjan Distinguished Lecture Series on behalf of our center director, Dr. Olivia Rayner, and our co-sponsors, the UCLA Center for Autism Research and Treatment and the UCLA Intellectual and Developmental Disabilities Research Center. So a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. This lecture will be held from 11:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time with a 5 to 10 minute Q&A at the end of the hour. So if you have any questions for our speaker throughout the lecture, feel free to send them through the Q&A link, which can be found on your Zoom toolbar. Also, you'll be provided with a link to complete the speaker evaluation at the end of this presentation, and we hope that you'll take a few moments to complete this survey. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to welcome our distinguished speaker, Dr. Kelsey Oliver Kerrigan. By way of background, Dr. Oliver Kerrigan is a postdoctoral fellow at the UC Davis Mind Institute. She received her doctorate in education with an emphasis in special education, disabilities, and developmental risk from UC Santa Barbara. She's a board certified behavior analyst with well over a decade of experience educating autistic students, conducting research in schools, and supporting families of individuals with neurodevelopmental disabilities across the lifespan. Her research involves teacher training and best practices in inclusive education for students with autism, with a particular focus on schools with high percentages of students living in poverty. So today we're fortunate to learn more about her very important and really timely research examining training ASD providers and evidence-based interventions in a virtual era. So with that, it's my sincere pleasure to welcome Dr. Kelsey Oliver Kerrigan.
Hi. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lageson. That was such a nice introduction. I am, like she said, Dr. Kelsey Oliver Kerrigan. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a postdoctoral fellow at the Mind Institute and just really excited to be here with you all today virtually to share with you some research our team has been conducting and some innovations we've had to train providers in evidence-based interventions during this virtual era. So that being said, our learning objectives for today are really to understand the coaching process for training teachers and providers in school settings to implement a specific evidence-based intervention, and to understand a hybrid model of EBI training that includes e-coaching, and we'll compare outcomes from in-person coaching to the e-coaching hybrid model. And then to understand some further adaptations that our team made to e-coaching and to virtual EBI implementation in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So some of you might have seen Dr. Jasper Estebillo present at this lecture series about a year ago on the TEAM study. And she really focused on how TEAMS uses an implementation science framework to address mechanisms that influence EBI implementation and sustainment, both in schools and mental health agencies. So AIM High is the EBI delivered in mental health settings, and Classroom Pivotal Response Teaching, or CPRT, is the EBI we've been implementing in school settings. And so today we are going to focus on CPRT, going in a little more depth and giving you a little more detail about that. And like I said, some of the innovations and adaptations that our team has had to make in light of current events. So to introduce things, many of you might be familiar with CPRT or PRT already, but Classroom Pivotal Response Teaching, or CPRT, is a naturalistic developmental behavioral intervention. And it's an adaptation of PRT that was adapted collaboratively with educators to really help support good contextual fit of the intervention. CPRT supports autistic students ages 3 through 10, and it has a focus on increasing motivation, communication, and academic skills. Because CPRT is a naturalistic behavioral intervention, we can really think of it as fitting into this ABC framework, or that antecedent, behavior, and consequence framework. So CPRT components are used both as antecedents and consequences to student behavior. So here are the antecedent components. We have gaining student attention, following student lead, using preferred and varied materials, interspersing easy and difficult tasks, and taking turns. And then the student responds. And the consequence components that teachers use are direct reinforcement and contingent reinforcement and reinforcing attempts. So I know that's a lot of components there to think about, but we'll show you some examples of how these components are used in action. So this is a CPRT lesson in action, and this teacher is working on reading comprehension and literacy skills. You'll see that she incorporates a preferred interest in animals by having the activity be about bats. And she offers the student choices. You'll see she gives them an option of whether she should participate or not. She facilitates student turns and presents both easy and difficult tasks. And then you'll see that she provides a direct reinforcer of getting to do part of a bat-themed dot-to-dot activity for answering different questions about the bat book, different comprehension questions. So watch the video and consider how the teacher is using these CPRT components you see on the right.
Journal. Okay, well, we have another bat story today. But before we start, you guys are going to do a dot to dot. Now, Jaden, can I do a dot to dot too? I have an extra. Is it okay if I join you for dot to dot?
Yes.
Oh, thanks. All right. I'm going to bats at the beach. Now remember, as we answer our questions during our story, we're going to only start with 1 and go to 10, but not yet. We're waiting. Okay, bats on the beach. What's the name of our story, Jaden?
Bats at the beach.
Bats at the beach. You're right. Ms. Nicholas didn't read it right. No, you know why? They're thick pages. It's a fun book. So, Omari, where do you think this story takes place? Looking at your front page, your cover page. Where do you think it takes place?
But this is a made-up
I was going to ask that question. You beat me to it. Brett, is this story fiction, pretend, made up, or is it nonfiction true? What do you think?
4.
Is it real or not real? Do you think it's real?
It's not real.
That they roast marshmallows? It's not real. It's just a made up story. Yeah, what's made up mean? Jaden, does that mean fiction or does that mean nonfiction? It's made up. It's pretend. So is it fiction or nonfiction? It's false. It's fiction. Very good. Let's do 1 through 10 because we said our story is fiction. False. So find number 1, and you're going to go dot to dot all the way to 10.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you an idea of what CPRT looks like in action, although it is variable from lesson to lesson, as you can imagine. So we'll start by talking about CPRT training that is conducted entirely in person. So approximately over 6 months, this training consists of a workshop. This includes lecture material about CPRT components, some video examples, case illustrations, lesson planning practice, and it is a day-long event that we do. And then 4 group consultations that are an hour each. And these are interactive group training sessions where we discuss different topics in a little more detail, things like lesson planning, fidelity of implementation, data collection, things like that. And also includes some troubleshooting and brainstorming as a group. And then we have 6 individual coaching sessions This is all spread out through the course of 6 months. And these coaching sessions involve one-on-one support from a coach, which occurred immediately after the teacher or provider delivered the intervention. So a coach is coming into the classroom, watching the lesson, and then providing feedback. And then teachers also videotaped their lessons at 3 different points throughout the study, both for data collection purposes, but also for coaches to be able to review them and provide feedback as needed. So here is an example of what this in-person coaching looked like. As I mentioned, coaches would observe a lesson in the teacher's classrooms and collect fidelity of implementation data and take some notes. And then immediately following the lesson, the coach would guide the teacher through this self-reflection form. You see part of it on the screen here. And the teacher would rate themselves based on how well they implemented, or they felt they implemented each component. So a plus if they felt like they really rocked it, a check if they used it sometimes, but maybe want to use it more in the future, and then minus if they might have forgotten that component. And so they'll discuss things the teacher did really well, they'll discuss components they might want to work on moving forward, and then kind of collaboratively decide what the next steps are and how to, and brainstorm some ideas of how to address those steps. So here is an example of our fantastic coach, Janice, with a teacher here.
Looking at snowman, what are some things you could provide? What could be reinforcing to them involving snowmen?
The only thing I can think of now, in hindsight, was having them go over to the refrigerator, the freezer, and touching the ice part, like the snow, and being like,
Yeah.
"That's cold," and they would get a
Yeah.
kick out of the sensory part.
Okay,
Maybe,
giving them that privilege of when we're done, you can.
yeah. Or even if
Okay.
they needed, like Josiah might need an out of seat break in the
Yeah.
middle of the activity. So when it gets to made of snow, what does snow feel like? And then have him go touch something cold.
Yeah.
Like the ice part, because it always builds up in the freezer.
The other thing I was thinking about is, those little instant snow. Have you seen those little instant snow
I have one
things?
actually over
That would
there.
be perfect.
That would be.
So there's a little clip of what CPRT coaching in person might look like. Lesson planning is also very important to teachers, and it's a tool we utilize in our trainings to really help teachers apply the knowledge that they're learning to their actual classroom setting. And we've really learned over the course of our studies that teaching teachers how to plan, how they're going to use CPRT is a really helpful piece of learning this. So here is an example of a CPRT lesson plan template. And you can see it is broken down by CPRT component, and then teachers list their plan for implementation for each of those components. And we provide teachers opportunities to develop lesson plans throughout group consultations and during coaching as needed as well. Another challenge that teachers often face when using a more naturalistic intervention like CPRT is figuring out how to collect data. So we created a system to help teachers keep track of student progress over time when they are implementing CPRT lessons. So during a group consult, we focus on a couple different ways that teachers can collect data on student goals, both during individual and group lessons. And we have teachers practice using some of these data sheets during the consult with some video examples. And then another component is that using a data sheet during their lesson and submitting it to their coach is a component of reaching CPRT certification. So if teachers are wanting to be certified, we ask that they complete a data sheet during one of their CPRT lessons and submit it to the team. So when we look at the results of this in-person training, we really see a lot of positive outcomes. We found that 73% of the 111 teachers that completed training met fidelity requirements. And the majority of teachers found CPRT to be really useful and effective. One teacher said that I found my students did learn the skills presented and they seemed to have fun while learning, and I did too, which is great to hear always. Another thing we're seeing is that it's changing practice and how teachers are practicing. So one teacher said that once you get used to implementing the choices and shared control and the reinforcement or rewards for attempts, it makes teaching so much easier for all involved, and we end up with so much more. And we hear that pretty frequently, that it's not just beneficial for maybe their target student with autism, but it really helps improve the quality of the lesson for all of the students. And we are also seeing improved child outcomes following CPRT intervention. So this is including improved student engagement and reduced challenging behavior. So these are all really encouraging findings, but our research team really wanted to figure out how we can provide this training to more teachers and really extend it to more, give more people the opportunity, since access to training is really often limited by how close a school or a district is to a training site. And there's a lot of research to show that distance technology can be effective for training teachers to use different evidence-based practices to support autistic students. And this could really help to address these training gaps that we're seeing experienced by schools that are geographically distant from training opportunities or from training sites. So we wanted to figure out if using a hybrid model of training that included this e-coaching would be an effective way to provide CPRT training to teachers. So participants in this study included 166 teachers or direct service providers. So this would be speech pathologists or occupational therapists, all working in school settings. There were 32 participants in the distance group that received the e-coaching and 134 in the in-person group that received just all in-person training. Inclusion criteria were being a teacher or service provider, speech pathologist, occupational therapist, etc., in a public school, and having a student on their caseload between the ages of 3 and 10 with an educational or a medical diagnosis of autism. And just a note that all of this this phase of the study, all of this training and data collection occurred prior to COVID-19 restrictions. So we were doing this e-coaching distance model prior to when the pandemic struck. Now, for this phase, for the in-person group, CPRT training looks identical to what I just described earlier, with the workshop and the consults, the coaching sessions, and those video recordings. For the distance group, however, we still conducted the one-day workshop in person, and this was really to help give the coach and the teachers an opportunity to get to know one another and build rapport and practice using the apps on the iPad and things like that. But for the distance group, everything else was conducted through technology. So our consults, all of our coaching sessions were conducted through Zoom. And for the video uploads, teachers recorded and uploaded their videos through Box. Okay, so you saw an example of what in-person coaching looked like. Now here is a little example of what e-coaching looks like for CPRT. So this is going to look similar to the video I showed earlier, but you'll notice now that the teacher and I are connected via Zoom. So the teacher would implement their CPRT lesson in person in their classroom as they usually do, and set me up on the iPad so that I could observe and watch the lesson. And the coaches, we as coaches would turn off our video and our sound so that we weren't a distraction in any way. And so then we would have this feedback session right after the lesson. So here is a little clip and it has some captions kind of describing what's going on too.
Okay, and then for varying instructions, how do you feel you did with that one?
I feel like I did pretty good. I would give it a plus. I tried to was a bit more cautious this time, and I tried to use different terminology and but also with the tracing, try to get him to use his finger this time, and trying other things that we haven't done in the past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that you had used different phrasing in the way that you presented your instructions. Like sometimes it was like a leading statement, sometimes it was just
Yeah, like
the
a fill in
word.
the blank type
Yes.
of, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There's so many things I think you're doing well, and something I really liked during this was all the choices that you provided. I think that by giving him the choice of like letting him trace with his finger or trace with a marker, that really helped to motivate him and keep him engaged, because it was really tricky to hold the utensil, the writing marker, the writing utensil, and trace the letter at the same time. So I love that you gave that option of letting him trace with his finger. Interspersing learning goals and easy tasks. That might be one we might want to think about incorporating a few more easy tasks just with these newer goals that are a little trickier, like writing. So just considering what are some other tasks that he's already mastered or some skills he's really good at. Do you have any thoughts on what else you might include in the activity as easy tasks?
Yeah, like I was saying, maybe like instead of doing just the marker, maybe including like the tactile and having him trace with the finger on that sandpaper thing, or getting stamps and trying to stamp a few of the letters.
Oh, like letter stamps? And
Letter stamp, yeah.
Oh, that's a great idea. And that kind of helps work on the gross or the fine motor skill of like holding and manipulating the stamp.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Are those ones you might want to think about as your next focal component, is thinking about incorporating more maintenance tasks? Does that sound about right?
Yeah. Just other tasks besides. So it's still kind of like a writing goal, but just using a variety of different writing implements, or using a variety of other ways that we can do some writing, but it involves other materials like stamps or letter stamps or tactiles or
Does this sound about right? So incorporating more maintenance tasks kind of related to the writing goals, like tracing with finger, using letter stamps.
Okay, so hopefully you can see the similarities there. So what did we find? So we used multi-level modeling to assess outcomes and found that for training completion, more participants in the in-person group completed training than the distance group. However, this difference was not statistically significant. Similarly, for CPRT certification, we had more participants in the in-person group reach certification than in the distance group. But again, it was not statistically significant, although with a p-value of 0.08, it is approaching significance. And then for CPRT fidelity, we saw that the in-person group had slightly higher average fidelity scores, but again, they were not statistically significant. So in terms of these outcomes, we're not seeing any statistically significant differences between these groups. When we look at CPRT acceptability, so this was a rating that a measure that teachers and providers filled out after the intervention, we found that there were no significant differences between groups. So this is indicating that teachers from both groups really found that CPRT met their approval and is implementable and is easy to use. So that's all really encouraging to see as well. Then when we look at the coach-teacher alliance measure, so this was different items that referred to how supported and collaborative the coach-teacher relationship was. And we only see a significant difference for this item here, where I received an appropriate amount of feedback from the coach. And we saw that in-person scored significantly higher for that item. So we see in general, teachers felt about the same with how acceptable they found CPRT and with the alliance and support they felt with their coach, with the exception of that one item there. So the data are really encouraging, but there are still many barriers that need to be troubleshooted and that we had to troubleshoot in the process to really make this successful. So I mentioned that this training all occurred prior to the pandemic. So many folks yet had not had the knowledge or the training or the experience with technology that they do now. Now that teachers and providers have spent many hours on Zoom and navigating these applications, it's a lot easier for them. But this was prior to that, and so it was challenging and took a lot of extra training and support and communication between coaches and teachers and the research team. There was also often a lack of reliable technology. Many computers were outdated, or they didn't have the technology. They might not have had wireless routers or hotspots or things that they needed to make e-coaching a reality. There were also some district technology restrictions. So there were often restrictions on what apps could be downloaded and by whom, and with what login credentials. So we had to really think a lot about that. It also is difficult to build that coach and teacher rapport through e-coaching, just meeting someone and talking to someone virtually. Even though we did have that initial in-person workshop specifically to build that rapport and get to know one another and develop that relationship. But it is challenging to continue that over time virtually. And so we had to do a lot of troubleshooting related to this throughout the process. So we had to do a lot of, we did some assessments, some kind of capacity and readiness assessment type things to figure out what technology schools already had, what physical technology they had, what their Wi-Fi connection was like, if we needed to provide a hotspot, what the research team needed to help support with and provide. Did they need a microphone because it's too far away from the computer, or we provided as a research team the resources that we were able to. We also got the school or the district IT person involved, so we made sure to loop them in and coordinate all of this with them to figure out where the loopholes were and where we needed to help fill in the gaps. So that was a big help, team communication and troubleshooting through all of this, which was very beneficial to our team and to our teachers, because we had already been working on e-coaching when the COVID-19 pandemic struck. And during this time, as you're all aware, teachers were still required to keep up with their classes, to educate their students, to provide high quality services, to address IEP goals. But now everything is being done 100% virtually. So needless to say, this was a whole new adventure for everyone involved, for parents, for students, for families, for teachers, for coaches. I think this is something that we're all trying to figure out how to navigate. So that being said, we had to kind of shift gears with our research and our training a little bit. But before we could even provide coaching, we really had to figure out how to implement CPRT virtually, since it hadn't really been done before. And all teachers were now providing their lessons virtually. So the CPRT coaches got together. We brainstormed some ideas for how CPRT could be adapted, both based on our own experience and from strategies we were hearing about from teachers that we knew that were working in the field and just figuring things out as they went. And then we put together some lessons, and I piloted a virtual CPRT lesson with a former student of mine. So we want to show you what that looked like as a first step in this virtual training. So this student is a 10-year-old male with autism. He loves cars, he loves Disney movies and animals and dinosaurs, and he expressively communicates in 1 to 3 word phrases, and he receptively understands multi-word sentences. He also expressively and receptively identifies most letters and numbers up to about 50. And he had received behavioral services such as PRT at school since about age 5. So he was familiar with this framework. And prior to the lesson, I collaborated with the caregiver, and we discussed some target skills we wanted to work on with this student. We talked a little bit about his proficiency with technology. So, how independent is he using the mouse, and how can he click on his own? Can he move it on his own? Can he type numbers? Just to figure out what our expectations were going to be. And we talked about a plan for prompting, when to provide support, when to reduce that support. This parent was fantastic and has received many years of education and training at this point. So she really has a good understanding of her son and when and how to jump in and provide support. So you'll see in this video here, you'll see in this video that the caregiver is there beside him, kind of helping, prompting, and redirecting if need be. And the goals we're working on are identifying letters and colors and numbers. So just take a look at this, see if you can spot some of those CPRT components. We do have captions that pop up kind of highlighting some things. And then we'll talk a little bit about it afterwards.
Get it.
Hi, Jet.
Who's it?
I can see.
Hi. You look so happy. Are you looking at yourself? You want to see something cool? Watch this. Hi.
It's Woody.
Woody, that's right.
Woody, I'm in Toy Story. You're right. Do you want to play a game? Okay, let's play a game. Ready? I'm going to show you something. Do you want to do reading or math?
He's pointing to the car.
Oh, perfect. Yeah,
On reading side.
that's helpful to have you tell me which side is going to. Okay, you want to do car reading. Let's do car reading. Things I like. I like animals. D-O-G. Dog. Here goes the dog.
Dog. Dog.
I like fast cars. Can you spell cars? C A Look, Jet. C A. Jet, let's spell cars. C A. S. That's right. R-S. Let's watch our car. Whoa. Do you want Woody or Math? Woody. Okay. Where is Woody? My turn. Woody is under the red square. Let's find red. Found him. Where's Woody? Okay. Your turn, Jet. Woody is under the blue square. Where's blue? Where's the blue? Yeah, you found him. Okay, Jet, let's do another one. Ready? I'll do one. Woody is under blue. B-L-U-E. B-L-U-E. Look. Jet, do you want to watch a video? Or do you want to play math? Math. Okay, let's try it. Look on your mark. Jet, do you want more cars? More cars. Let's do it. Here they go. They're so nice. Look, I'm gonna push number 5. There goes number 5. Jet, push number 3. Push number 3.
Click on
Good job, you did it. Right. All right, so you can see that some of the activities were more successful and more engaging than others. It was really important that I follow the student's lead and pay really close attention to his responses, and if he was less engaged or less motivated, then maybe switching up the activity, providing a choice, things like that. You can also see it took a bit of creativity to consider how to incorporate and deliver reinforcement in a virtual way that the student really enjoyed. This student is usually is really reinforced by a lot of tactile and physical touch. He likes to be squeezed, and he likes to have his hands clapped and things like that. And that is obviously not possible through a virtual setting. So we really had to think about how to incorporate things that were really interesting, but still addressing some goals. And keeping the affect and the enthusiasm really high and engaging was also really helpful and beneficial for this student. So in addition to having to figure out how to adapt CPRT for virtual implementation, we also had to make some changes or some adaptations to our training itself. So our workshop is usually a day-long in-person event, but no one wants to sit through a 7-hour Zoom meeting. So we converted some of this content to short narrated videos using Edpuzzle that included interactive activities that teachers have to complete in order for the module to move forward. And with Edpuzzle, we can also track whether the teachers completed the modules,
We can view their responses to the questions and the interactive activities that we embedded throughout. So we're trying to make it as similar to the interactive in-person workshop as possible. And then the remaining workshop content we covered in a live virtual workshop over Zoom, and we spread that over 2 days. And then for coaching, instead of zooming into teachers' classrooms and watching a lesson, we were zooming into teachers' Zoom lessons. So we were joining their Zoom lessons with our cameras off and microphones off and observing through Zoom. Something that we found through our discussions, through our experience, through talking with families, we found that caregiver support and engagement in students' virtual learning was usually a really important, often critical component to successful e-learning. So we wanted to add some caregiver collaboration and engagement strategies to our workshops and to the consults. We also provided some guidance and support to teachers throughout coaching sessions regarding how they could best collaborate with caregivers. And we also added some caregiver components to the CPRT lesson plan as well. So what that looked like were these 3 sections here that we added. So we wanted teachers to really be actively planning and thinking about collaborating with caregivers to help support the CPRT lesson. So we included a section on parent priorities and goals, a section for parent ideas for different reinforcing materials or activities, and a section to describe some ideas for environmental planning to help kind of limit the distractions during the lesson, make sure the student is not laying in bed during the lesson, but maybe set up for success sitting at a table and chairs and things like that. So teachers are encouraged to discuss these things with parents when developing their CPRT lesson so that parents have some kind of collaborative input and can help contribute to the success of the lesson as well. So here is an example of a really just fantastic virtual CPRT lesson that was implemented by a teacher in our study. And this video also has captions describing the CPRT components as they're used, but just take a look at how CPRT kind of translated to this virtual lesson that is a group of students. So she has, looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 students, 3, 4 students on this group lesson. Okay, so take a look.
We started with the egg. Can you show me an egg with your fist? Can you guys curl it up? Let me move my picture so I can see. Ooh, Isaac, that's a good caterpillar egg. Matthew, can you show me an egg?
An egg.
Yeah, can you make one? Ooh, that's a good egg. Santiago and Terry, you can show me an egg with your hand.
I can make me to an egg.
Do you know what happens? First, you have an egg. What hatches out of the egg?
With the egg.
What hatches out? What was that, Isaac? Could you say it again? The caterpillar.
Hey.
Show me a caterpillar.
Hey.
The caterpillar. What comes out of the chrysalis? Raise your hand if you remember the answer.
What comes out of the chrysalis?
Matthew, do you remember? What comes out of the chrysalis?
What comes out?
It turns into a butterfly.
It turns into a butterfly. Yes. Can you guys show me a butterfly? You can make it like this. You could do your wings like a butterfly. Oh, look at all of those wonderful butterflies. Oh, raise that hand if you remember. What do we start with? Isaac.
An egg.
We start with an egg. Let's choose an egg. I have 2 choices over here. Should we start with this egg, the real one, or the cartoon egg?
The real one.
The real egg. You chose the real one. So let's put the real one up here on our first stage. All right. There's our egg. What comes next in the life cycle? What hatches from the egg? Santiago has his hand up. A caterpillar, Santiago. Which caterpillar should we put? The yellow caterpillar or the stripe caterpillar? Stripe.
All right, so you can really see how creative this teacher was. Many of the teachers found different educational platforms and different virtual tools like ebooks or interactive calendar activities. So it was just so impressive to see how teachers found ways to incorporate CPRT using technology. I had another teacher that was practicing subtraction problems with borrowing, and the student loves SpongeBob SquarePants, and so every time the student would complete part of the problem she put up on her digital whiteboard, she would move that part of the problem, and there was a part of a mystery picture of SpongeBob SquarePants. So as he progressively finished more of the problems, more of the picture, the mystery picture showed up. Just some really clever ways of incorporating student interest and finding ways to deliver reinforcers that might not be like a tangible physical item. So where are we now? We are currently finishing up intervention and data collection. We're at the very, very end of the school year now. We have very positive indications that teachers can implement CPRT virtually with fidelity. So we had 21 participants enrolled in this cohort. 1 teacher discontinued training and 18 have completed training. So we have 2 in progress. But 19 have met CPRT fidelity. So one of those in progress teachers still has a couple coaching sessions left to go, but they have already met fidelity. So we see 95% of teachers have met CPRT fidelity, implementing it virtually. So this is all, again, very positive, very encouraging, but we've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and we're still continuing to learn lessons. Some challenges we faced are issues with student engagement, especially during group lessons. As you can imagine, it can be very difficult to keep, it's often difficult to maintain the attention of adults on a group Zoom call. So imagine trying to maintain the attention of 5 to 10 elementary students on a Zoom call. Reinforcement delivery was often challenging, like I mentioned, because we really couldn't provide like tangible physical items. So we had to get creative with how to include that. And it often included like fun video clips or educational games or something like that. Often students would just not show up to their scheduled sessions. I even had a teacher once deliver her CPRT lesson to a student who was in the car on the way to vacation. So, we roll with the punches and we're flexible, and but there are many times that students just might not attend their lesson. There's also a lot of variability in how available and engaged caregivers were able to be. We know many parents were really stretched thin throughout the pandemic with trying to work and trying to support their other children and just simply surviving. So many parents were just not able to be as present to support that virtual learning. And oftentimes it was the parent, when the parents were there, it was the parent or the caregiver, whomever was there, delivering the CPRT intervention. So it was the coach teaching the teacher and the teacher training the parent or the caregiver to deliver the intervention. So it was almost like a train the trainer model. So we had to consider that when we were coaching as well. But there were some facilitators. Like I mentioned, teachers had a new familiarity and comfortability with technology, so it made that process a lot easier. We didn't have to do quite as much training or support with using technology. And technology really made coaching more efficient. We didn't have to commute all the way to schools. It was quick and easy to hop on a Zoom call really fast with little notice if need be. So there were some definite benefits to technology as well. So with that, I'd really like to acknowledge our fantastic principal investigators, Dr. Abin Stamer, Dr. Lauren Brookman-Frazee, Dr. Anna Lau, all of the team study research team and coaches. This is just a small snapshot, this picture here, of all of the people that work together to make this a reality. And then we want to acknowledge all of the enrolled programs, the districts, the leaders, the providers, the families, everyone else who made this line of research a possibility. So with that, I'd like to open it up for questions.
All right, well, thank you so much, Dr. Oliver Kerrigan. Very interesting and really innovative use of training over remote delivery. It's an interesting time to be talking about things like remote delivery of training and also of special education services. So thank you so much for your thoughts on that. I'm definitely going to encourage our attendees to send their questions through the Q&A version of the toolbar on Zoom. We're doing that through the Q&A button, not the chat button. So feel free to send your questions there. In the meantime, as we're having questions come in, I have a couple for you as well. So do you have, I know you're collecting data, but do you have any data about the effectiveness of delivering CPRT to students remotely, or any preliminary data or observations that you'd like to share?
So we don't have any data on the student outcomes at this point for the virtual CPRT training, but like I mentioned, we are seeing that teachers are able to implement it CPRT to fidelity. And many teachers have met the certification requirements as well. So I didn't go into detail about those, but it's basically completing all of the coaching, completing all of the consults, submitting a data sheet, reaching fidelity on a lesson plan, and reaching fidelity in person. And so we have many of the teachers already that have met the certification requirements. So not only are they implementing CPRT well, they are implementing it well enough to become certified.
That's great.
And we are seeing positive, anecdotally, we're seeing a lot of positive responses from students in terms of how interested and engaged they are in the lessons, at least from prior to having a CPRT lesson versus after having one.
Yeah, that's great. Very encouraging. What ages would you say kind of functional levels and cognitive abilities are appropriate for delivering CPRT remotely? And I know that your work is primarily about training the providers, but that'd be a good provider question. I'm sure that you get that question a lot. And what do you recommend?
Yeah, so the line of research so far has shown CPRT to be effective for supporting ages 3 through 10. So those are the criterion for the study, at least. But we don't have any specific criterion in terms of IQ or comorbid diagnoses or anything like that. So I don't know that I could speak to necessarily how effective CPRT is broken down by different categories, like, based on IQ level or based on these different demographic characteristics. But we do see positive indications for a wide range of students. And I want to avoid using the labels of functioning and high and low functioning, but students with a wide range of support needs and a wide range of IEP goals. So we're seeing that it can support students that are learning first words and simple pre-academic skills, all the way up to long division and reading comprehension and writing stories and things like that. So it really can support young students, young learners, all the way through, almost to middle school. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Additionally, I just want to really commend you and your research team on being able to pivot so quickly during this really challenging time of COVID. And I know that you were already planning to do this, as you mentioned, even prior to COVID. So that was very timely. So kind of in that vein, how do you see remote training sort of continuing in a post-COVID world?
Well, I think we can all agree that many things are going to be shifting in terms of how we do things remotely. I think there's going to be a shift in general towards more virtual interaction, virtual training, things like that. So I think this is going to be really beneficial and important to keep exploring moving forward, to figure out how we can implement to fidelity these evidence-based practices and how we can train others to do it from a distance. I didn't mention, but as part of this whole pivot for us, once we figured out how to implement CPRT virtually, we put on a whole webinar for our past cohorts. So for our prior teachers that participated prior to the cohort that was currently ongoing, we provided a free training on basically how to support your autistic students during virtual education and how to use CPRT that way. And it is offered, we do have it on our website on classroomprt.org under the resources tab. If you hover over it, there's a ton of, we put the lesson plans, different CPRT virtual lesson plans up there. The CPRT manual is up there for free. So I really think moving forward that to be able to provide the services to families and to teachers and to communities that really are in need, these geographically distant communities, or just under-resourced communities, this is really going to be, I think, an important shift in the field.
Yeah, again, kudos to your team for providing these resources to families and to educators, and for making them free of charge as well, so even more accessible. That's, that says a lot about your group, so thank you for that. We have a question from Michelle T. She would like to know if you have any recommendations for parents who want to implement CPRT at home, especially during summer, to avoid regression.
Absolutely, we do. So just going to refer you back to our website there. So we have multiple handouts under the resources section that explain CPRT components in family-friendly ways. So we have a couple different documents that outline each of the CPRT components, but then there's also a plan for kind of school-home collaboration. So school can, the teacher or the provider can list how they're using CPRT and what's been working, and kind of have this document that outlines that goes back and forth between home and school, so that teachers can kind of collaborate with parents and kind of provide them the support. And we also have multiple resources in English and in Spanish on our website that explain what CPRT is for families and kind of give them some practical suggestions of how to utilize it at home. So I think that's a great place to look for families that are interested.
And you said that website is the one that's on the screen, the classroomprt.org?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Really great resource. Well, thank you so much to Dr. Oliver Kerrigan for your really interesting and informative lecture. I think you've left us with a lot of really great resources as well, which I know people always appreciate. We will be sending a speaker evaluation to all of our attendees today. We really hope that you'll take a moment to complete the survey, but once again, would like to give a big thank you to Dr. Kelsey Oliver Kerrigan for her taking time today to present this really important research and share these resources with our attendees.